Welcome to the Michigan Works Association 2021 Annual Conference. My name is Lupe Salazar Hamden, and I am the Youth Career Advisor for Michigan Works Southeast here in Lenawee County. On behalf of the staff at the association and all the sponsors, we thank you for being a part of the conference in this session titled Inclusive Hiring Strategies. Be sure to visit the exhibitor booths during the designated exhibit hall times. Before we begin today's session, there are a few housekeeping items I need to share with you. This session will have a Q&A. Please hold your questions until the end. However, the chat is open for questions presenters will be able to answer throughout the presentation. We are eager to hear your feedback about the conference of this session. Please take a few moments to complete the short survey that I will be attaching into the link. The link to the survey will be posted in the interim of the presentation. Presentations will be available post-conference on the Michigan Works Association website. And now I would like to introduce your speakers for this session. Lisa Bartley, Business Relations Consultant with Michigan Rehab Services. Gary Hollick, Business Relations Consultant with Michigan Rehab Services. And Christine Roberts, Occupational Therapy Consultant with Michigan Rehab Services.
Thank you, Lupe. My name is Lisa Bartley. I have brownish hair. I have brown glasses, brown eyes. I'm wearing a blue blazer and pearl earrings and a pearl necklace. And I'm in my home office, and there is a pink wall with family photos. I'm going to pass it off to Gary to introduce himself.
Good morning. My name is Gary Hollick, Business Relations Consultant with the state of Michigan. And I have brown hair, I suppose, with some gray in it. Brown glasses, I suppose, that never really paid much attention. My background, you could see I have lots of different things in my background, working from my home office right now. And that is a walleye on the wall, or as Lisa referred to it as something else. But it is a walleye on the wall, in case anybody wonders.
And this is Christine Roberts. Good morning, everybody. I'm an occupational therapy consultant with MRS, like Lupe said. I am a white woman with brown shoulder-length hair. I'm wearing a pink sweater today, and I'm hiding in my bedroom. So behind me, I have a bed and a gray wall.
So we want to talk a little bit about our objectives for today. As we go through today's presentation, as Lupe talked about earlier, please use the chat area to provide feedback, comments, etc. We do want this to be an active presentation. We're looking for your feedback and thoughts on the different topics we cover. We're going to explore non-traditional interview strategies. We're going to learn what questions are legal and effective. We're going to present case examples of businesses that have adapted their hiring process to be more inclusive. And we're going to learn how to partner with MRS to diversify your workforce. So why? Why are we here today? When you decided you were going to attend this presentation, what were your expectations? What were you hoping to get out of it? Anything in particular? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Please put that in the chat. What does an inclusive workforce look like to you? Inclusive workplace or workforce is one where people with all kinds of differences and disabilities feel welcome and valued for their contributions. It's a place where people with disabilities, both visible and invisible disabilities, have the same opportunities for advancement as their coworkers. Why does inclusivity matter? Or why should it matter in the workforce? Any thoughts on that? Please put those in the chat. What are some of the advantages of an inclusive workforce? Higher job satisfaction, lower turnover, higher productivity, higher employee morale, improved problem solving throughout the organization, increased creativity and innovation, increased organizational flexibility and the ability to learn from people at all levels, improving the quality of personnel through better recruitment and retention, and decreased vulnerability to legal challenges. As businesses look to expand their talent pool, they need to consider being more inclusive in their hiring process. It is important for them to think about what that might look like for their business. Every business is different. We want you to be comfortable and ready to help them make this step. The bottom line, or the central question in today's world: how does a business acquire and retain the most productive and effective workforce? Developing a more inclusive workforce or workplace will assist businesses with increasing their ability to develop a more inclusive, productive, and effective workforce. Now, Christine is going to share some statistics with you.
This is Christine. Thanks, Gary. So often when we hear the word statistics, some of us shudder and some of us get excited. So I think we should get excited because it's really giving us another why. It's giving us more context as to why inclusive hiring is necessary. So the statistics that we see on our screen is that 1 in 4 Americans are an individual with a disability. If we center that into our state, Michigan, the statistic changes a little bit. It's 1 in 3 is an individual with a disability. So why is this important? Well, one thing that we know is of those people who are working, 30% of them are working part-time, not full-time. And this, the statistic of a person with a disability who has been employed has decreased since 2019 to 2020 by about a 1.5%. So why is this important? Well, we know that right now employers are needing talent, and this is a pool of candidates that we can start to capture. And we also need to think about disability is a class of persons that all of us can become at one point in our life, especially as we age. We know that disability and the incidence of disabilities increase as we age. And so this is a candidate pool that employers should eagerly want to capture. So with those statistics in mind, really thinking of Michiganders as 1 in 3 of us being an individual with a disability, we're now going to talk, we're going to pass it over to Lisa, and she's going to start giving us the contrast of how we can kind of use those statistics in our favor.
Thanks, Christine. So Christine talked about some scary statistics, and I present to you a very scary photo. How many of you have been in this situation, have been in this traditional interview that is just an intimidating situation? You look at the physical setup. Does this setup really enhance anyone's performance, or does it put everyone ill at ease? How many of you have been in this situation and enjoyed it? Probably none of us. What are some details you notice from this photo? If you could put it in the chat, I'd love to see what you notice. There's a lot of body language going on here. And even what do you imagine is on the face of the job applicant? Yeah, I like what Lisa says. No one looks too welcoming or happy to be there. Yes, really good point. Oh, the arms crossed. And what do we know about the arms crossed? Very much being closed off. Oh, the pointing. Yeah, everyone loves to be pointed at, right? That feels good. And closed body posture. Yes, thank you. And what do you think that candidate is feeling? What do you think's on her face? Any thoughts? Yes, they're all stern. And she's probably what? Afraid to death? Help, I like that. Like she wants to leave. Awesome. Thank you. I also noticed there's 3 glasses of water. Why don't they give that poor girl a glass of water? Again, it's that inequality at table. And I'll just shout out to somebody, I think who's in the room, who, when I was interviewing, I got so nervous, I couldn't talk. And she went and got me a water bottle or had one brought in. And it helped me. It helped me to calm down for a minute. But it's those things where, it's not equal. You feel like you're in a firing squad and nobody feels comfortable. So just wanted to point out this, scary scene of a traditional interview. And thank you so much for your thoughts. And we're going to talk about some other aspects of a traditional interview in the next slide. So traditional interviews have their limitations, which we're going to talk about. Tanya, why so many men interviewing? Yeah, exactly. And why was everybody white in the room? That wasn't a very diverse panel, was it? Thank you for bringing that out. I know in the state, we do try to have diverse panels. So there's lots of limitations to interviews, but I'm going to start with the positive. Usually a traditional interview can assess proper dress. Did the person look the part? Did they dress professionally for that industry? It also can assess, does the person have a professional resume? Were there any typos? Because usually you need the resume to get to the interview. Were there typos? Was it customized or was it some generic resume? They can tell that if somebody put some time into it. It definitely assesses that first impression that the candidate makes. It can definitely assess that person's comfort with small talk. If the applicant did their homework, did they ask the right questions? When the business said, what do you know about our business? Was the applicant ready to give some good answers that was more than a cursory glance at the website? They definitely, like I said, comfort with small talk and communication skills. Is the person able to think on their feet and answer questions quickly? And it also assesses the person's body language and their eye contact. And bottom line, it really assesses likability. Does the interviewer, want to say hello Monday morning to this job candidate and hear about their weekends? Or as things are today, since there's no water cooler conversations, does the person, want to spend all day on Zoom with this person, noticing the background pictures in their wall? So a little bit more thoughts about interviews. From the candidate's position, they are on their best behavior. It's like a first date. In the dating world, we would say that person, we're back on the same slide, that person is conscious, that person is sending their representative. So many of these items too that we look at are all affected by bias, whether conscious or unconscious. Attributes such as eye contact, which we make such a big deal of in our culture, can be affected by disability. It also can be affected by other cultures and other ways that people have been raised or trauma in their past life. We focus so much on that, and it's really, what job description really talk about eye contact, right? Unless you're a news reporter, does eye contact really matter in your ability to do your job? And I would also say back in the day, we talked a lot about strong handshakes. And thankfully, due to COVID, that is one more item for somebody maybe who's missing a hand or an arm that they have to jump over. Nobody's going to shake your hand anymore. And if you've got an elbow, you can do the bump, or you can knee bump if you don't have an elbow. And I think that really works out well. All these factors, when we look at them, are mostly subjective, except for maybe the dress in the resume and the doing their homework. And at the end, these kind of qualities don't necessarily reveal having the most talented or qualified candidate, but really somebody who's really good at interviewing and can make a good impression. I'm wondering if you can mention in the chat, has any of you ever made a really bad hire based on a really good interview? Somebody who could look good on the day of the interview, but when she got to work, or you knew that they were not going to do the job. I certainly remember someone like that. And I see a couple more yeses. Thank you. All right, now we can move on to the next slide. All right, so we talked about some of the things that traditional interviews can assess, but there's definitely limitations. So the problem, in my opinion, with traditional interviews is it's tell, not show. People are talking about all the stuff they could do, but they're not really showing or demonstrating. So you're really only able to rate them on their interview skills and not their job skills. And we see this woman, blah, blah, blah. Her work ethic cannot be assessed. And essential job function performance is not assessed either. And we're really realizing on just first impressions. Candidates are nervous and they're thinking about how can they stand out? How can they connect with the interviewer? How can they be memorable? And they practice questions such as, where will you be in 5 years? Communications are really over relied upon. And extroverts and likable candidates often win out over very highly qualified introverts. And often people with disabilities have challenges with those first impressions due to discomfort with small talk or eye contact. A lot of folks on the autism spectrum have a difficult time with small talk and eye contact, as well as other folks. But they are capable of doing the tasks on the position description. I like what Tanya says. Those manly handshakes can be really uncomfortable and hurt somebody's hand if they've got rheumatoid arthritis or even lesser arthritis. So thanks for mentioning that, Tanya. So those are some more limitations. And we've got another slide talking about what are the ingredients of an effective interview. So we'll go to the next slide. So in an effective interview, the environment is relaxing. It's open and calm. Is there a rule that says that the interview needs to be a firing squad? What about instead of having one person on one side of a long board table and 3 people on the opposite side, that we have a round table, that we have a smaller table, that it reflects more equality and it's not that intimidation factor. Nobody wants that. And in an effective interview, candidates know what to expect and how to prepare. I had the opportunity to work in a summer internship program with Michigan Works and the University of Michigan. And at one point, I suggested on behalf of my students with disabilities, can we teach to certain interview questions and then ask the businesses to use those questions when they interview candidates for employment for the summer internship? And we ended up, of course, adopting it for everyone because everyone wants to know what questions they need to prepare for. And then the businesses were happy to know which questions to ask. And we could avoid all those, who would you go to dinner with if you could pick anybody? Or what animal would we be? And we could stick to things like strengths and teamwork opportunities and experiences. And it was a win-win for everyone. We also, in an effective interview, accommodations are provided, whether it's more traditional accommodations like an ASL interpreter for a deaf client, or it's simply those questions, maybe those questions on large print for someone. Maybe the lighting is adjusted. I have a colleague in Ann Arbor who needs to have the lights dimmed because of a visual impairment. Maybe it's someone who needs the lights higher, more brighter. Maybe the room temperature is something that is affecting someone's comfort or ability to perform their best. And even fragrance-free. Some companies are fragrance-free, some hospital systems are, others are not. But for someone who's got some kind of allergy to fragrance, that can be, a major stumbling block for them to perform their best. And the most important thing is in an effective interview, actual abilities are assessed, not just that first impression. And when you think about all these things I mentioned, do you think they only help someone with a disability, or do you think they would help everyone? So I obviously am biased, and I believe it's going to help everyone. I like some of these comments. Thank you. All right, now we're going to talk about a little bit more specifics now that we've talked about in general. So we want to talk about some specific strategies in diverse industries that really demonstrate the effectiveness of a non-traditional, more of a skills-based interview. So some of you may be aware in the music world, they've been doing blind auditions for a number of years. And Christine's going to talk about that after I go over this list. Also in the IT world is another industry that has focused on looking at skills. And sometimes they send assignments ahead of time. Sometimes they have a whiteboard during the interview. But the IT world is really focused on that. Instead of, that whole tell me about it, it's show me how you would do it. We also have an example from the human service world, which isn't always as frequent in this kind of interview. And Hewlett-Packard presents a great opportunity for an MRS customer that got a wonderful interview and a wonderful opportunity for an internship because they had more of an extended interview process, which was really to the advantage of students with disabilities, especially autism. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about how I worked with the University of Michigan dining services to develop a talent pipeline for their dining host positions that was pre-pandemic. Now, Christine is going to introduce our first example. Thanks, Christine.
This is Christine. Thanks, Lisa. So on the screen right now, you see a picture of a gentleman playing the violin, and he is in a room with a panel of judges, we assume, and in between them is a curtain, so they can't see each other. And so this is an example of a blind audition. Now, I don't know about you guys right now, but when I hear the word blind audition, I automatically think of the show The Voice, and I think of someone standing on stage and singing to, people who cannot see them. And then if you like their voice, you turn around, right? Well, they obviously stole that idea from the orchestras, because in the 1970s and the 1980s, orchestras noticed that they were predominantly male. And so they started incorporating this technique of a blind audition to help make their orchestras more inclusive, essentially. And so since the time that strategy was introduced, so the percentage of female musicians in the top 5 orchestras in our country was about 6% in 1970, where in 1993, after this technique was implemented, that increased to 21%. So right there, we see how just this simple strategy of just listening to their essential job function helped make their workplace more inclusive. Let's go to the next slide, Gary. So talking about the IT world, this is where we get the example of technical interviews, right? So it has been more common in that industry for companies to ask their candidates to actually demonstrate their skills. So again, like we said earlier, it's not just show and tell, it's actually show me. And so they incorporated strategies and tasks where they actually incorporated an essential job function into the application and interview process. So an assignment that's like a remote coding challenge for an applicant, or in the interview after a discussion, incorporating a whiteboard challenge where the candidate is actually showing their problem solving and showing how they would solve whatever problem the employer introduced during the interview. So again, the employer can actually see what your thought processes are and how you're incorporating your knowledge to do the essential job functions. Let's go to the next slide, Gary. So this one is a community-based therapy employer, and I may use the word we when we talk about this strategy because this was my previous employer and I helped them implement it. So this came about because of a natural problem, right? So this employer was a non-traditional therapy company. It was not like a hospital or a clinic. And they had hired a few therapists who ultimately didn't stay, right? They stayed for about 6 months to a year. And on their exit interviews, they essentially just said the culture wasn't a good fit for them personally. And so from that information, more of an application process was devised. So what this company did was they would collect the normal applications and the interviews and the resumes, and they would have a sit-down interview with the candidate. And then after that, they would ask the candidate, okay, based on that, if you're still interested, we would like you to do an 8-hour job shadow. And you can break it up however you want. So some candidates came one full day and they observed one of the current clinicians for the company and saw how their day went, how their work was, what the culture of the business was. A couple other candidates broke that up into 2 4-hour days or a couple hours in the evening. And ultimately, we wanted them to see what the job was, what it actually looked like. And then there was a second interview, and this interview was less focused on the applicant and their credentials, And it was more focused on what their opinion of the company and the culture and the program was. And I can't really think of another term other than weeding out, but essentially in that process, you even had candidates that said, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't think this is the kind of job I want. I don't think I would be successful there. But then you also had candidates that said, yes, I am interested. I want to continue. And ultimately those employees were retained. The attrition rate between their clinicians really reduced at that point after implementing this kind of interview process instead of just one interview. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Gary, and he's going to continue with our next example.
Hi, this is Gary. So Lisa earlier talked a little bit about IT interviews, and Christine did as well. And she also mentioned Hewlett-Packard. We're probably all familiar with Hewlett-Packard, the Hewlett-Packard computer company. Been around for a long time. HP, like everybody else, wants and needs talent. And they realize that the traditional methods of recruitment aren't always effective. And because of that, they were missing out on a lot of talent. And they wanted to do something and needed to do something different. They reached out to Microsoft to learn more about their process for hiring, because Microsoft had developed a good process for hiring people. And Microsoft connected them with public vocational rehabilitation as a means of connecting with a different talent pool. HP and Public VR worked with local community rehabilitation partners to develop a one-week cohort experience at HP. The first one was in the summer of 2019. Individual customers who worked with Public VR across the country were recruited nationally to apply for the cohort. Those individuals that were asked to apply were people that were somewhere on the autism spectrum. Those chosen after the application process, were invited to HP out in Idaho for a one-week cohort to work with HP recruiters and other team members to evaluate their skills and ability to work with a team. So that's a different way of assessing skills. They also assisted the candidates with learning more about the HP culture and HP as a whole, what their needs were, what their long-term goals were, and other things that are important for people to understand if they want to work for a company. And they also worked with the individuals in the cohort, the participants. They worked with them on their resumes, learning interview techniques, what to expect from an HP interview, and those kind of things. So at the end of the cohort, 2 candidates were chosen to come back for the paid summer internship at HP. Ethan, who's a customer of Michigan Rehabilitation Services, had been attending Michigan Technological University up in Houghton, Michigan. And while there, he had been working on a computer science degree. So he was one of the individuals that we reached out to, asked them if they were interested in applying for the cohort, which they were, which he was. And he did get invited back for the internship during the summer of 2019. And during that internship, Ethan assisted the team with a lot of different things, but one of the things he's relatively proud of is he assisted the team with creating a process to optimize low-end user printers. Basically what Ethan did, looking at programming language, he went through and weeded out wasteful code in the programming language, which saves a lot of space on the servers and on the printer server. And that process is expected to save HP hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. So it was pretty big deal what he did. He was so well liked that he was asked to come back this past summer for a second internship, which he did virtually. And he recently graduated from Michigan Tech University and is now looking for opportunities out in the world doing programming. What's great about the situation from Ethan's perspective is he got to have an opportunity to work with a major computer company, where he may have not gotten that opportunity initially, because if somebody had looked at a traditional way of interviewing him. So HP got a great employee. They got a great program going. It allows them to evaluate individuals to work for HP. Like I said, that was a project that they had developed after talking to Microsoft. And now Dell is starting to implement something very similar. So Dell has recognized that this works for other companies. So Dell wants to duplicate that process within their own system. So it also demonstrates how big companies will share knowledge and work together to try to have the best workforce that they can have. So we're going to show a little video. Ethan is the second person. That's Ethan right there on the screen. We're just going to show a little video of his experience and what he thought.
I would say I had a very favorable experience. Got to discover what Boise has to offer.
Excuse the technical glitch. I'm sure Gary will get us back on track.
Is it not working, Lisa?
Yeah, we lost it.
How about now?
I see it. Great.
Interested in me, and then also kind of like, I would say surprise and excitement and anxiety all at the same time were a big part of how I felt, because it was the kind of thing that it was a big experience unlike anything I've done before. But seriously, I would say it worked really well in the sense that they prepared us for the interview. They prepared us ahead of time for the interviews through a lot of workshops to improve our skills, as well as having mock interviews. And because of that, I feel like I was much better prepared for the interviews that I had later on.
I would say take it in a heartbeat. Because, well, a lot of reasons for that. First of all, and if you're on the spectrum, chances are you have or have had in the past the need to prove something to yourself. I'll never underestimate the importance of that.
I would say the Spectrum Success Program it made it so I was looking forward to it a lot more. It made it so I kind of got a feel for what HP's workplace culture is like, and that was a lot of what assuaged a lot of my fears, because I've had experiences with workplaces before where I've kind of felt very stressed working there, and I didn't really fit there that well. But then when I was here for the Spectrum Success Program, I got to see what people working at HP was like, and I found that kind of the workplace culture here is very, very compatible with me. So that relieved a lot of the issues that I was having before, and that was one of the major benefits of the Spectrum Success Program for me.
I was muted, sorry. So that just demonstrates how thinking differently about recruiting individuals for your team and looking at inclusive interviewing, an inclusive recruiting process can help a team be more successful, help a business be more successful. Now, I'm going to pass it along to Lisa to talk about U of M dining.
Thanks, Gary. There I go. I'm just waiting for the slide to.
Yeah, I am too, Lisa. I don't know why.
Fine. We're fine. I can start talking about U of M.
Okay.
It happened again. We're talking 2019 pre-pandemic in the fall. U of M was having a really hard time filling host positions. And those are the folks that perform tasks such as cleaning tables and also checking students in. And so we were able to create a novel approach with the recruiting process. I worked really close with Joe Cooling, who was the dining manager, and also my team of counselors at Michigan Rehabilitation Services. The counselors were able to get the job descriptions, share them with our customers, and help them apply online. So a lot of things were, typical normal business for the business, but then we added some things that were innovative and, a little bit different. So there's a picture here of South Quad, the dining room. That's where we did all the interviews. It was lovely. At those interviews, often the counselors were there. I was there. Job coaches were welcome to attend. A few parents provided transportation and moral support. Candidates were given the questions ahead of time. There was no secrecy. Candidates were given a tour when they arrived. They were made to feel comfortable. It was not, we didn't present it as a high stakes event. It was just a comfortable environment. And all different types of folks with all different types of disabilities applied. It ran the gamut from maybe mental health to some even mobility disabilities. There was a deaf client. It was really, and it was all different ages too. It was a very diverse group of applicants and eventual hires. So in the interview after the tour, they were asked to demonstrate how to clean a dining table, how to buss a table, and they were given all the resources and plastic gloves and things that they needed. There was a quick turnaround process, which was very helpful for our clients. Hiring decisions were made quickly, sometimes so quickly that it would be a Sunday night and I would need to call the candidate and say, "You've got orientation tomorrow. Can you be over at Wolverine Tower?" So it was, it was nimble and quick, and we just kind of kept the process going. So most of the candidates were offered positions. They hired close to 20 MRS candidates or made offers. And MRS was able to help with onboarding needs, like an interpreter for the deaf customer. And then the next semester was awesome because they invited us back to do some disability etiquette training with them, which was very effective and well received. And also it was exciting because U of M won the Champion Award. MRS has a Champion Award that we do every October, and it's the highest award given to a business who really is devoted to inclusion and disability hiring. And U of M was able to receive that honor, which was really awesome. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the program on the next slide. So here's just a great pictures of what they did. You can see somebody bussing a table, and you can see other students getting checked in by our folks. I also wanted to point out that in this position, the two positions are kind of different. Either you're checking folks in or you're bussing tables. And U of M was willing to work with us to really job carve, which is to pick out which positions, which tasks worked with which individuals. And so we were able to do that for folks. I remember one person had, maybe more of a mobility issue. And so she was more comfortable checking folks in. And we were able to even look at the host check-in podiums were high. I'm somebody who's pretty short as well. So I was paying attention to that and getting somebody like the right kind of stool that was going to help her to feel comfortable there. So we really looked into every detail, partly because we spent so much time. Me and a counselor, Megan Parkin, were there almost every week in the fall of 2019. Another thing U of M was really flexible with doing was dorm assignments. We had some young men who were major, Go Blue, Wolverine sports fans, and they wanted to be in South Quad with the athletes athletes. And guess what? We were able to put them in South Quad. And we had some other applicants who were like, I'd rather be in a quieter environment. That would be better for me. And I remember going to the Martha Cook building, which is this quiet dormitory for women, and very, they have tea time. It's very old school. And this one candidate loved that environment. So we were able to really maximize the customization for each individual. And then, of course, our customers loved the free hats and shirts, also known as uniforms. They were just so proud to be a Wolverine. And, I think the reason why it worked so well was that there was just open communication, a lot of patience with the process, and just a lot of goodwill and commitment to diversity and inclusion. And I also had, great support from my home office that provided all these great candidates. So it was just such a win-win. And last year with the pandemic, it was hard. But I am happy to say that now that the dormitories and the dining halls are open, we had a couple of people return to their positions, and they're very excited about it. So that is definitely a win-win. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Christine, who's going to ask you about some effective interview techniques.
This is Christine. Thanks, Lisa. So yeah, open the chat. We want to hear from you guys. What kind of interviews have you been on that have been effective for you? That you've seen something different and said, yes, this is refreshing. So we did have a couple people already mention some things in the chat. I'm going to start with Tanya had mentioned, I had an interview once and they made a group of us make a paper whale. They wanted to look at our teamwork skills and how we worked in a group. Again, that's a great example of show me, don't tell me. Anna also put in here, I had to do a PowerPoint presentation for my last interview. That is awesome. I'm pretty sure I know who her last interview was with, and that's a really great example. So why don't we hear from you guys? What has been successful or effective, or that you've seen play out, and really show some inclusivity with the businesses that you're working with? Well, I know we're a smart group, so if we also want to do a contrast and say something that you didn't like, feel free. I think Lisa had mentioned earlier, what kind of animal are you? I had a boss who always insisted on asking, what tree would you be? Because that had happened to him before, and he just thought it was fascinating, people's answers. Again, not very effective. Lindsay has an example for us. Thanks, Lindsay. I had to teach the interview how to peel a banana. They wanted to see how I explained things and how I dealt with the interviewer's resistance to my instructions. I love that. As an occupational therapist, I kind of don't believe you can do something until I see you do it. So yes, that's great. Lisa's comment, for my first bakery job, I needed to sell a pack of sugar. Oh, I wouldn't be hired. I'm not very good at selling. That's a really good example, Lisa. Okay, in the interest of time, let's go on to our next slide, Gary. So I look at this slide and I get nervous. So I'm going to give us a pep talk as we talk about this. Let's remember that not all impairments are a disability, and not all disabilities mean that there's an impairment in the workplace. Okay, so employers cannot ask an applicant questions that can lead to them revealing a disability. And so I think that is a good frame for us to kind of see through when we look at these questions. So you can ask a candidate, can you lift 40 pounds? Right? And let's think about why. Why can you ask that? Well, because with an accommodation, I may be able to lift 40 pounds, right? Let's look at the first two bullets that we have. So on the legal side, how did you break your leg? I can ask anyone that, right? Who I see or I meet. Oh my goodness, what happened? How did you break your leg? I can't say it like this. Do you expect that leg to heal normally? And do you often break bones easily? That is just bad. Don't do that. So when I look at these questions, again, they make me nervous. So I like to think of how would this actually go in the interview? I think the use of a standard question is a good tip, right? Can I or can you perform the essential job functions of this job with or without an accommodation, right? I think that's the foundation where we can work from. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about inclusive onboarding. So, just past that next step. I hope you guys have noticed that throughout this presentation today, each time we switch between presenters, we announce our names. This is Christine, right? So that's if we had an ASL interpreter here with us, they would be able to communicate to everyone that the speaker is switching. Also, in the beginning of our presentation today, we gave you some descriptions of us. We gave you what we call an accessible introduction. So yes, that can help individuals who are blind and can't see us, but it also helps give context to our voices as well, right? So if you think about it, when you listen to the radio and you're listening to the same DJ all the time, once we always look at their website and see what they look like, and then you actually can picture them when you're listening to them. Again, that's not helping just people who are blind, that's helping people who may have information processing issues. It's providing context to the speaker. So really think of how, and again, we're incorporating that almost as a universal design, right? It can be helpful for multiple groups of people. So here are some tips that can also be utilized when onboarding. So using interpreters or screen readers, letting candidates know exactly what they're going to expect with agendas or even the interview questions being printed out, or a schedule being provided for the first 2 weeks of employment, giving people the chance to prepare themselves. Because again, this is in universal design. It's helpful for so many of us. I always like the idea of providing a mentor. Again, this is something that is helping the culture of nice, open calmness and support when you're onboarding any candidate. And so really being able to focus on how you can implement strategies that utilize a universal design. So when we think of universal design, again, that is making equity and leveling the playing field so that anyone coming into this position or job has an equal opportunity. So now that we've talked a little bit about that, Gary's going to continue on and let you know how the BND and the Business Network can help you and your business be more successful.
Hi again, this is Gary speaking. And so the Business Network Division is located within Michigan Rehabilitation Services, which is part of Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. And our division is based in Lansing. However, we have staff that cover the whole state of Michigan, which obviously you guys probably all know it's broken down by prosperity regions. So we are able to serve business across the state very effectively. On our team, we have licensed and nationally certified rehabilitation counselors, licensed occupational therapists and occupational safety advisors, as well as certified business solutions professionals. We also work very closely with our sister agency, the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, who have vision rehabilitation services, vision rehabilitation therapists on staff to assist businesses as well. And some of the things we can assist with, job descriptions, One of the things you want to keep in mind is that job descriptions typically are updated very often by businesses. Businesses tell us they just don't have time to get to it, or they just don't get to it. Assisting with rewriting job descriptions can ensure that job descriptions focuses on the essential functions of the job. And when you have job descriptions that focus on the essential functions, this assists the interviewer to have a more effective job interviews. This allows them to focus on the essential functions of the job during the conversation with the candidate, as well as have conversations early about potential accommodations that can be put into place to help the individual do the job. We can also assist businesses with developing an inclusive interview process, ensuring businesses are tapping into all the potential talent available to them. We have access to a pool of individuals with a wide range of talent who are motivated, reliable, and dependable. We have counselors across the whole state of Michigan that have a different, everybody has a different caseload with lots of individuals who have different talent, skills, and abilities, and they are very familiar with their candidates, and they are very familiar and understand what they can do, what their skills are, and how they can be a benefit to a business. So we are able to match those candidates with businesses to help them succeed and grow. We also can assist businesses with retaining a valuable talent. Our retention services, simple retention services that some people might think about might include assisting employees with hearing aids or CPAPs. However, businesses may also, because of COVID, may now have employees who are dealing with COVID, and they may have people who have issues maybe recovering from COVID symptoms. Some of those individuals could be referred to as long haulers. You hear that term. And although it is relatively new and we're still trying to understand how that can impact on individuals, we can assist with exploring best practices, best ways to support those employees as things continue to move forward. Now, we can assist businesses with looking at reasonable accommodations to help those employees continue to be a valuable part of your team. Also, you can see reasonable accommodations. That is something that we are very familiar with. We are experts in that area, and we can help businesses have those conversations with employees. So it's 11:07. I know we're getting short on time, so we'd like to open up for questions right now. Any questions, comments about our presentation? So Mark put what type of retention services can you provide? So when you look at retention services, if somebody is working for your business and they're struggling for one reason or another, we can help initially have that conversation about what might be going on, what they might be struggling with, and really it's all about helping you retain that employee. So to really say what type, I'd say all types. So I can just give you some examples. You might have somebody on staff that's struggling with hearing, and typically what happens is somebody's struggling with hearing, it takes them 7 years to acknowledge loss. So once they're willing to deal with that or want to deal with that, we can help figure out how to connect them with the best vendor for them to help them deal with that loss. Keeping in mind, we want somebody that's going to look at helping them get the best hearing aid for their needs. And then what we can do as an agency is once a hearing aid has been, once they've worked with a vendor and some hearing aids have been recommended, we can help have that conversation about, okay, what's the pros and cons about the different hearing aids? And then we can help with those costs. We can help individuals pay for hearing aids so you can continue to retain those individuals. Other examples could be, like I mentioned, CPAP machines. Typically, anybody who does any type of driving they have to pass the DOT physical every year. And typically what's going to happen is they're going to be referred for a sleep study. Sleep studies are typically $1,500 to $3,000. We as an agency let that individual pick the right vendor for doing a good sleep study, and we can also help pay for those services if the individual is unable to, or if insurance is unable to cover it. And we can also help pay for CPAP machines, which again, CPAP machines start out at about $1,500 to $3,000. So the whole point of retention services is to help you retain valuable employees. So those are some simple ones, but you may have somebody that you're working with that's struggling with repetitive motion injuries. They're experiencing pain on the job. So maybe we need to look at their workstation, and we have occupational therapists on staff. Christine is one of them. We can look at the workstation. We can make recommendations on things you can do to modify the workstation so it's more ergonomically correct for the individual, and us to help mitigate those symptoms of the chronic pain. So it could be raising, lowering a desk, it could be raising, lowering computers, correct keyboards, chairs. We do a lot of chair evals. So those are some examples. I don't know if Christine, you want to share any, or Lisa, you want to share any? Christine, you're muted. You're muted. Yeah, it's showing you as muted. I can't hear you.
Christine.
So somebody had asked about return to work. I give a great example of that. Michigan Works in Aranac County had reached out because a business was having an individual who had diabetes. He had been out for a year, coming back to work, been cleared to come back to work, and they had said to him, they reached out to Michigan Works because they weren't sure what to do. So Michigan Works brought us in to consult. And essentially, the person had been out for a year because he had his left leg amputated due to diabetes, coming back to work. And the employer knew that he was cleared to come back to work, but they wanted us to give them permission to bring him back to work. That's not our role. If a business, if a doctor clears somebody to go back to work, it's the business's responsibility to figure out what that could look like. So we consulted with them. We brought in an occupational therapist from Lansing, and her and I looked at the work site. We did a work site assessment, had a conversation with the employee, had a conversation with the manager, looked at the medical, and just basically did a walkthrough. And then we made some recommendations on what the person could do to bring them back to work, on the business, I should say. Simple recommendations were made. We had a conversation with them about who would be responsible for that accommodation. By law, the ADA, the business is responsible for reasonable accommodations as long as it's not proven as undue hardship. So we had that conversation with them, made some recommendations for bringing him back slowly. First week, 2-hour shift, second week, 4-hour shift, et cetera, to build up his stamina. And the person came back to work with the accommodations in place. And he's been there. He's been back with the business now for, I'd say it's 2-3 years going on now. He's promoted up twice within the company, and everybody's happy. So that's an example of return to work.
Hi, Gary. I just attempted to unmute Christine, so we're going to try and see if that works.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like it.
No, doesn't sound like it.
Okay.
So we're going on 11:13. Does anybody have any other questions? Looking in the chat, Lisa, did you spot anything?
There was a question about how long a sleep study lasts.
When I had my sleep study, I went over there. I keep saying I went over there about 11 o'clock at night. They checked me in, and by 1 o'clock, they had woken me up and said, "You need a CPAP machine." I had stopped breathing so many times in an hour. So basically, they said, "We're going to recommend one," and they kicked me out. So the sleep studies are designed to work overnight, but they don't typically do that because it's pretty easy for them to assess that that's a need for you. That's my experience with sleep study, and that's a common story I hear all the time with people I talk to about sleep studies. Other questions? So the poster here is for National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and that's an event that occurs every October. Businesses work with public VR to promote the hiring of people with disabilities. So October is the month that we focus on disability inclusion. So if you enjoyed today's presentation, our whole business services team, we got a great, awesome, wonderful business services team. We'll be doing multiple presentations during October and early November on a variety of disability employment related topics. We're going to start out on October 1, doing one on disability etiquette and inclusion, and we would go from there. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, reach out to Christine, Lisa, or I, and we can connect you with the consultants in your area, let you know what's going on. But everything we do, or most things we do during October, will be virtual, so we will have statewide participation. Looks like Christine's back up.
I am. Sorry, guys. I had to refresh. But yeah, Gary, I was just going to interject that a worksite evaluation is always a good start. And often accommodations, we think of them as needing to be equipment, but they might not be. It could be just changing a bit of a process, or really modifying how an essential job function is performed. So that was just my last little bit I wanted to get in.
Thanks, Christine. And
Yeah.
thank you everyone for joining us and your questions. And I think I'll let Lupe finish us off today.
Thank you. This ends our presentation today, and I would like to thank our presenters. We appreciate everyone's time. I hope you have all had great takeaways and will enjoy all the feature of the conference. Exhibitor and networking break is next. Take the time after the session to video chat with an exhibitor, or watch their informational video, or go to the networking tab to be randomly paired with another attendee for 2 minutes to meet with new people. And once again, do not forget to complete the survey that is in the chat. Have a wonderful day.